The Harvest.
Greetings, Africa FM listeners. This is Widad Allaoua with your Pan-African News appointment. Beginning with Algeria, the Algerian Council of the Nation begins debating the draft law criminalizing French colonialism in Algeria. During a public session chaired by the Council Speaker Azouz Nasri, the proposed legislation forms part of a national process aimed at affirming Algeria's historical foundations and safeguarding the country's collective memory. Let's listen to Minister of Mujahideen and Right Holders Abdel Malik Tashrif during the session.
Algeria embodies an explicit and clear condemnation of a defunct colonial system that in its essence was based on oppression, injustice, and the systematic denial of human rights. At the same time, it affirms that victorious Algeria never compromises its national memory and does not accept any infringement upon the truth of its history, nor any consensus of them under any circumstance or justification. Accordingly, this legislative proposal reflects the commitment of Algerian state to preserving its national memory and entrenching historical truth. It affirms the unalienable right to the Algerian people to recognition of the crimes of colonialism and to demand apology and redress in a manner that strengthens historical justice and establishes relations founded on mutual respect.
Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune receives His Saudi Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz bin Saud bin Naif bin Abdulaziz Al Saud in an official visit to the country. Former Malian Prime Minister Choguel Maïga addresses a letter to Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune calling for reconciliation between Mali and Algeria. Malian political analyst Mohamed Ag Ahmedou confirms that Algeria has always supported Mali in all peace processes. He stresses that Choguel Maïga's letter reflects a great deal of clarity, particularly given that in the past he had used strong language against Algeria. And according to Ag Ahmedou, he believes Algeria has won the communication battle against the narrative promoted by the Malian junta. Let's listen to Ahmedou speaking to Riyad Mamri.
Algeria has always supported Mali, both in all peace processes and even in training efforts. Former Prime Minister Choguel knows very well that Algeria will always strive for good neighborly relations because Algeria shares more than 1,400 kilometers of border with Mali. If Choguel today sends a letter to the Algerian authorities to inquire about dialogue with Malian authorities, it shows that his time in prison allowed him to regain his composure and make decisions. Algeria effectively managed its communication with Mali, as shown by Choguel regaining composure and acknowledging past denial and propaganda about the Algerian state during his time as Prime Minister in 2024.
In Western Sahara, the issue of Western Sahara is at the heart of an analysis by Spanish journalist Victoria Correra. She firmly reminds us that despite the Moroccan occupation, the territory remains non-self-governing in the eyes of the United Nations. According to her, presenting this case as a mere territorial dispute is misleading. She insists that international law tolerates no shortcuts and that only self-determination of the Sahrawi people will allow for the conclusion for this decolonization process, which began in 1963. Turning to the humanitarian situation in South Africa, more than 200 people confirmed dead as a result of torrential rains and devastating floods, and thousands displaced, and cut cross borders into Mozambique and Zimbabwe. The floods are also washing away roads and bridges and damaging thousands of homes. Algerian General of the Army Said Shingriha, Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, arrives in Qatar, responding to an invitation from his Qatari counterpart, Jassim bin Mohammed Al Manai, taking part at the 9th edition of DIMDAX 2026, the prestigious Doha International Maritime Defense exhibition. Beyond the exhibition itself, this official visit carries major strategic stakes. The Army General is set to hold talks with senior Qatari officials aimed at strengthening military cooperation between Algiers and Doha. Turning to Somalia, where the National Army announces that it thwarted a large-scale offensive by the Al-Shabaab terrorist group. The attack targeted the Gabad Gubni area, located in the Middle Shabili region in the southeast of the country. Not only was the assault repelled, but the government forces also regained full control of the area, inflicting what the ministry described as heavy losses on the terrorist ranks. In a final communique issued in Lomé on 17 January 2026, following a high-level meeting devoted to the conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, foreign ministers from several Great Lakes countries, as well as representatives of the United Nations and international partners, reaffirmed their commitment to achieving lasting peace in the region. Meanwhile, the M23 rebel movement announced this week the complete withdrawal of its fighters from Yovera, a strategic city in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, which it claimed to have captured last December. In Sierra Leone President Julius Maada Bio issues a historic apology to the victims of the civil war 24 years ago. During the first ever National Remembrance Day, the head of state calls for healing and unity to turn the page on a war that claimed more than 100,000 lives. On an economic achievement, Algeria reaches a historic milestone in its olive oil sector for the current season. National olive oil production exceeds 150,000 tons, according to the National Interprofessional Council of the Olive Oil Sector. The 56th edition of the World Economic Forum opens today in Davos, Switzerland. This flagship gathering of multilateralism and free trade, which brings together thousands of global leaders for more than 100 countries each year, will focus on the spirit of dialogue, the central theme of the 2026 edition, amid heightened geopolitical and economic tensions. The forum is set to serve as a key moment for discussions on major global challenges. Keeping up with African economy, the United Nations report World Economic Situation and Prospects 2026 projects that Ethiopia and Kenya will lead Africa's economic expansion in 2026, with East Africa recording the fastest growth rates on the continent. Emmanuel explains more.
A new United Nations forecast places Ethiopia at the forefront of Africa's economic resurgence in 2026, alongside Kenya as East Africa emerges as the continent's fastest growing sub-region. The UN World Economic Situation and Prospect 2026 report projects Africa's economy to grow by 4% in 2026, rising slightly in 2027, driven largely by stronger performance in the Eastern Corridor. East Africa is expected to post growth of nearly 6%, outpacing West, Central, and Southern Africa. Ethiopia's contribution is anchored in ongoing macroeconomic reforms, infrastructure expansion, and recovery in agriculture and manufacturing. Whereas Kenya benefits from diversified services and regional trade leadership. However, the United Nations cautions that growth remains uneven and vulnerable. Rising public debt, climate-related shocks, food price pressure, and global financial tightening could slow progress if reforms stall. The report also stresses that the need for job creation, industrial diversification, and private sector investment to translate growth into broad-based development. For Ethiopia, the outlook signals renewed momentum, but long-term stability will depend on sustaining reforms, managing inflation, and ensuring peace and productivity drive the next phase of expansion.
On the cultural scene, the Algerian writer and journalist Mustafa Ait Mohoub emerges as an intellectual icon against oblivion and misinformation. It documents the course of the Western Sahara cause, exposing the falsity of the colonial narrative, and renews the affirmation of a people's right to freedom and self-determination. More details with Yasmin Ben Ashur.
The culture and political media scene has grown with a new book by the Algerian writer and journalist Mustafa Ait Mohoub, titled Western Sahara, A People with a Dream of Freedom. The book talks about the Western Sahara issue as a case of ending colonial rule. It explains how the Moroccan occupation tries to hide the truth and change history and law. It also speaks about the media campaign used to mislead people and shows human rights abuses against the Sahrawi people. The author clearly supports the Sahrawi people's rights to choose their future. Mustafa Ait Mohoub.
Why write this kind of urgent book? The Sahrawi issue was in a special situation before the UN Security Council and its latest resolution, and since the war started again in the region. The Sahrawi issue is at a dangerous and difficult moment. As someone who supports the cause, I feel what the Sahrawis feel. What I can give is a book because our network tried to create media spaces outside Algerian media which fully supports the Sahrawi cause. But outside that space, there are other platforms. The book stays as a reference that cannot be erased, no matter how hard someone tries.
The book also shows the human and political side of the issue and confirms Algeria's strong support for the Sahrawi cause. It is a useful book for journalists, students, and anyone who wants to understand the Western Sahara issue.
Concluding with sports, the Senegalese national team was crowned champion of the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations after defeating their opponents with 1-0 in the final. The winning goal was scored by Pape Goyi in the 94th minute with a powerful and precise strike, sealing the title for Senegal. After having a goal disallowed, the Senegalese national team was crowned champions of the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations after defeating their opponent. After having defeated their opponent, and as a response to that, the CAF condemns what it described as the unjustified behavior of Senegalese players and officials during the Africa Cup of Nations final. Despite of that, congratulations to Senegal. This was the harvest of the day, directed by Yasmin Al-Baki, control board with Khalid, streaming with Islam, and observation with Taos. Thank you for your attention. Join us again tomorrow at the same time, 3 p.m. only at